Hello. Oh, can you hear me? Am I clear? I was just setting things up, so. Oh, perfect. So, what's the biggest difference between Octane and Redshift? So, the big difference is beyond the feature set. It's sort of like the difference between Arnold and yeah. So it's sort of like the difference between Arnold and V-Ray. So V-Ray uses a lot of other techniques to calculate global illumination, like it has irradiance maps and light cache and stuff like that. And Arnold is purely brute force. So that's the same difference between Redshift and Octane, except that on the GPU. So Redshift is more. Redshift has a couple of other techniques to calculate global illumination, so which makes it faster, especially for interiors. So if you have a pure brute force engine like Octane or Arnold, they're not very fast for interior rendering because the light bounces around a lot and it takes time to calculate all of that. Redshift can do that a lot faster. But so that's the big difference. Beyond that, it's mostly like a feature thing. So well, the big feature difference is Redshift has pretty strong support for attributes, and it's also better integrated. Octane, the thing with Octane is the development of Octane is a little interesting. So direct integration into Houdini has some gaps, primarily with attributes. Like right now, attribute support is there for meshes, but not for points or curves. So that's the big difference. Oh, hello. But yeah, beyond that, so I made a list of what all is Octane primarily missing right now. So there's no. I use Octane mostly, but again, the thing is, my usage is very specific. I'm almost an illustrator. I don't do a lot of animation work. So from that standpoint, Octane works perfectly for me. Not that you can't do animations with Octane. Like I've done a few animations with Octane, but there are some places where Octane can really sort of like, so for something like you can't do motion blur with displacement. Like that's an issue. So if you're doing like characters which have displacement and then you want to do motion blur with it, it can't do that. No, I think I got bored. I did 3 of them and then I stopped doing render man. I'll come around to it again. Okay, and yeah, so what else is missing? Yeah, so points and curves, attribute support for points and curves. It supports pack primitives at a basic level, but you can't do instancing with pack primitives. And you don't have custom AOVs. I don't know if does Redshift is anyone here a Redshift user? Yes, no, show of hands. Yeah, well, that would be interesting. But yeah, so there are things in the works right now, like according to uh, their current upcoming feature list for Octane, that is, that they are planning to implement light path expressions and yeah, so that's in the works, and there is like point and curve attribute support is in the works. So those two things are there, and even USD support is in the works. Like they actually did, like I did a tweet about that a few days back. They did like a small image in April. So USD work is also going on. So there are things. This year, Octane has been pretty impressive. Like really they've done like a lot of work this year with Octane. So I'm going to do 2 live streams. Like today I'll do the basics, and I don't know, like if you are an Octane user, maybe this one will be boring. But oh yeah, a lot of people shifted over to Redshift. Yeah. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. I kind of figured like since I use Octane a lot, I was like, hey, I should at least do like 1 live stream for Octane. Because I was just doing it. I was doing RenderMan and I did one for V-Ray. So I was like, okay, and I'll do one for Octane as well. Why not? Since I use it a lot. Yeah, in the last year, they've done a fair bit. Like I had a list that I had made. Hold on a second. Yeah. Okay. So this is in the last year, like everything that they've added. So there's a fair bit of stuff that they added. And RTX support is still in the works, but it's sort of there at a basic level. Am I excited about Karma? Kind of. Like from what I've read right now, Karma can only be used within the LOPS context. Like I don't know if I'm right or wrong about that. But from what when they showed the Solaris presentation, they did speak about yeah, that is definitely there. It's faster for interiors. I don't know about particles. I've never really compared the two, so I don't know. Okay, coming back to Karma, I get distracted. Yeah, like right now, from what I saw in the Solaris presentation, and I think they mentioned it somewhere in the Solaris presentation, that Karma is only available inside of LOPS, which is very odd. So like if you're introducing a new render engine and it's only going to be available in a particular context, it feels weird. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. Again, like, and the point is it's brand new, so I'm sure it'll have a fair bit of feature support. Like there won't be a point in introducing a new render engine and saying like, oh, it doesn't support everything that Houdini has. I mean, from what they showed in there, it definitely supports volumes because they did a volume render. So yeah, it depends on, what features it supports. Speed is the big issue, right? So once it gets released and we get to try it out, then we find out whether I should get excited or not. Because currently it's only going to be CPU, which is not bad. Like I don't have an issue with that. But if it comes close to the speed of something like Arnold, I'm very sure it's only going to be brute force. Like Mantra is also primarily brute force. So if it comes close to the speed of something like Arnold, I'll be very happy, because Arnold as a CPU render engine is like a pure brute force CPU render engine is easily one of the fastest, on the market. So there's no issue there. But yeah, speed for me, like more than anything else, like, because if you look at Mantra, like Mantra feature set wise is phenomenal, right? Like it has a wide array of features, but the speed just makes it, like, especially if you've used Redshift or Octane or even Arnold, then it just feels like, oh God, now I have to use Mantra. Even though Mantra is very fast for volumes. Like if you regularly do a lot of volume renders, Mantra is fantastic. But in general, it just becomes like, wow, I don't want to use this right now. So yeah, so it all depends on how fast Karma is going to be. Okay, I think it's time so we can start with this. So I don't know, most of you have shifted over to Redshift, so I think you're probably going to get a little bored, but enjoy an Octane presentation. Yeah, so what I'm planning right now is this one I'll do the basics and also talk a little bit about how to speed up Octane in terms of setup. And then I want to do another one, which is I just wanted to cover yeah, here's the thing, right? Render engines are never going to match. That's something that is almost impossible, because unless you're just doing like very basic PBR stuff, like I have 4 substance maps and I bring them in here and I assign them and I render them with an HDR. Even then you'll spot differences. But the basic issue is, it's the way I look at it is like render engines are like cameras. So you have like a Nikon camera does not match a Canon, which does not match a Sony. So it's sort of like color science. So, how each render engine implements its shaders and lights and, how things work is where the differences come in. So I can't really say like, why Octane looks different from Redshift, which looks different from Arnold, which will look different from V-Ray. It all comes down to your preference and what works for you. Because you can, at the end of the day, you can also go into compositing and juice up the image a lot more over there. So some things do matter, but you can always modify a lot in post. But yeah, it's almost impossible to try and, like, you can if you really work at it, but at basic level trying to match the look of 2 render engines is almost impossible. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to stop getting distracted now. So give me 1 second. Give me a second. I'm supposed to do something. Damn it. Yeah, okay, I was looking for my phone, which was lying right behind me, so I had to turn all the way around to find it. Yeah, okay, so the idea is to do two live streams. So the first one is going to be basics, and in the second one I wanted to cover all the new features that they've been adding, because since November of 2018 they've sort of been going crazy. Like they've been just throwing tons of features in there, and like November 2018 is when Octane 2018 came out, and then 2019.1, and they released 2019.2 a few days, like a couple of weeks ago. So I just figured, hey, why not just do a live stream of all the various like new features that have come up into it. So okay, so just give me 1 second before I get distracted again. I should keep talking, but just okay, so let's get started. And I'm done with whatever I was doing. Okay, so this is my basic scene, and I'm going to try and, like, this is the basic render. Where is it? Yeah, so that's the image that hopefully we'll create by the end of this, okay, or something close to this. So this is pretty much, I threw in everything that I could find. So it's like this is subsurface scatter, that is glass, and this is metal, and volumes and particles and lights which are being colored by attributes. So it's a whole bunch of things. Even this is being done by attributes, like the bunny. So I have like a green glass and a pink glass, and I'm mixing them together using attributes. So just as much stuff as I could throw in. This is actually this is something where Octane really shines, because there are about 18 spheres, okay, and they're all meshes. So the lights in here is pretty impressive, because you have these 18 spheres which are giving out light, and then there are 2 area lights on either side, and the sparks are giving out light and the fire is giving out light. Okay, so this is just an insane thing to try and light up, and this is about an 11-minute render at full HD on 2 graphics cards, which honestly isn't bad, considering how much stuff is going on in here and the amount of lights in here. And Octane doesn't have a concept of lights, everything is a mesh light. It's pretty impressive. Like, these are the kind of times where Octane can genuinely shine. Okay, so my scene is fairly simple. So I have this I have about 3 models. I have this rhino, and I have these dogs, and then a bunny, and I also brought in this guy here so I could do like a little bit of substance stuff with it. And then I have some grass down here, And then I have a little bit of this smoke that I had simulated. This is a static shot. So I just took in like one frame. So I have some smoke and some, sparks. And then I have another smoke from behind. So this is the entire scene. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to start with the basics, and then we'll just, go through all the stuff. This is the latest one. This is the latest beta, or beta, whatever you want to call it. So this is 2019.1. So this is 2019.1 RC2, which is the latest one. Okay, so RC3 is the latest, but there's no Houdini plugin for that as yet. This is fairly stable. I haven't had any issues as yet, but yeah, let me just close all of this. And let me get rid of these guys as well. Okay, I'm going to get this in the middle. Alright, so the first thing is setting up Octane. Yeah, it always gets recorded. You can, watch it any point of time. Alright, so the thing that happens with Octane is setting up Octane is a bit like RenderMan, in the sense that you have the renderer broken up into two places. You have the roughness, which has like a render node, and then you have the shopnet, which has all the settings. So kind of like with RenderMan, you have like the unified integrator, which is in the shop network, and then you have the ROP network, which has other settings. In Octane, the ROP network is almost just a placeholder, right? Like it has just a few settings, like the path of the image and like turning on motion blur and stuff. But otherwise, 90% of the settings are in the shopnet. Okay, so just to build it, so just take a ROP network and take a shop network. And what you can do is, you do get a ready-made thing called Octane render target. Okay, but I don't like using that. I prefer making my own custom. And what I do is, you can build an Octane network, and let's just call it render. Okay, and come into the ROPNet, create an Octane custom. Don't make an Octane render. Okay, an Octane render just goes into the out folder. Like it doesn't, it's not made here, in your custom folder. Anyways, and then click there, and then just pick up, go to shopnet, and pick up render. Okay, now we need to set up the render target. Okay, so what you can do is get rid of this guy and create out render target. So this has, if we can zoom in, you can see like it has a bunch of options. So it has the camera settings, environment settings. Yeah, that's one of the issues. So camera, environment, imager, blah, 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 all of that. Okay. Since I mostly do illustration work, Octane is great for me. Like it works. Okay, so start off with the camera, and you can take a thin lens camera. Just turn off autofocus, because it tries to focus automatically. Okay, so we can close that, and then take a texture environment, which will allow you to take like an HDR if you want. Okay, so connect a texture environment, and then also create like a texture node. Okay, so we can set it up. Okay, so just take a texture image RGB, and then take transform 2D and a spherical projection. Now, all of this just needs to be done once, okay, which is why I'm kind of doing it, so that you kind of understand how, what you can do. Now, the reason for doing this is very simple, because it gives you a lot of flexibility later on. Okay, and then you have the imager. Okay, so you can just type in imager. So the imager gives you stuff like, basic color correction, which is now there in like the Redshift render window. You have like color correction stuff. That's the imager. And then we can take a path tracer. You have multiple kernels, but mostly I end up using the path tracer. So just take the path tracer and connect that in. And then you need, take a post-processing. Render passes we'll take later. Okay, and then take another texture environment. This is for like overriding. Okay. Oh yeah, the imager stuff is pretty cool. Okay. So if you want one HDR for lighting and another one for reflections, that is where the camera environment comes in. Okay. Now what you do is, once you've done all of this, okay, this is what I generally, this is where I generally am. What you can also do is we can just set this up. So usually the GI clamp, bring it down to 1, so that it doesn't, generate that much light, light bounces essentially. It also helps control fireflies, like if you have too many fireflies. Get the filter size down to 1, it makes the image sharper. We'll get the samples down to 500 and start at, diffuse and scatter depth at 3. So do this much, and then what you want to do, so now you've set it, you basically just set up Octane. Now this is like, okay, this is too much of work. But what you want to do is, once you've done this much, okay, hello, what you want to do is come into your shelf tool and create a new shelf. Okay, like you can click on this arrow here. Sorry, click on the plus, create a new shelf. Okay, so I have a new shelf here. And then select both of these and just drag and drop them onto that shelf. Okay, so I'm not going to do that because I already have one here. Okay, so what that does is it stores the whole thing up here as a shelf button. So the next time you open up Octane, you open up Houdini, you just click on that shelf button and there you go. So all of that stuff that I just set up, you just do all of that in, with just one click of the button. So life becomes a lot easier than what you were doing before, which is essentially what you want. Okay. So if you are new to Octane, or if you've been using Octane and you just want to speed up the setup time, this is essentially how you do it. Okay, so once you've set this up, we can just hit render. So I want to take my camera and I'll make it like 640, 480 and zoom in a little bit. And come to the Octane shelf and hit IPR. Okay, so you have two options here. Like if you come into options and come to IPR, you can use the custom OpenGL or you can use mplay. Personally, I use the custom OpenGL because I find it more flexible. Like it has more options in there that I like. So just hit IPR and it should do its job. Okay, so right now it's pink because there are no materials assigned. So let's just assign a few materials. Okay, where are we? So we'll come into the shopnet and we can just type in something basic. So let's just take a glossy shader for the background, and then I'll create an Octane network. I'll call it Rhino, and I'll create a simple glossy shader in here, or let's create a universal. So a universal shader is sort of like the Redshift material. Okay, so after version 4, Octane added like a standard PBR shader, which has like all the various options that you want, which wasn't there before. So this does all of that. So it has 2 layers of reflection. You can do subsurface scatter, you can do light emission, you can do all of that, within this one material. And I'll just assign this here. And now if we hit IPR, so there you go. You have your basic. So a couple of things I like about Octane is you can sort of, especially with this thing, you can, move inside here. You can also zoom in over there. So this is not, you're not scaling up the image, you're actually zooming into the render. And then if you want to reset it, you can just reset the view. The top and bottom lines are basically showing like that's your render size. Okay, if you don't want to see it, just slightly move the image, those lines will go away. You can also do a render region from here. Okay, and you can just do like a control and drag. So that will give you a render region, which you can also move around. So Octane is partially interactive. Okay, so everything that you do at object level gets updated, but SOP level changes don't get updated. So you have to sort of stop and restart the render. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I just want to come in here and make this slightly darker. And let's add a light. Now Octane gives you, so Octane technically does not have lights. Okay, so mostly it just like you make a piece of geometry and you assign it a light shader. Technically that's how it works. So if you worked, like if you were an early Corona user, like when Corona was in beta, that sort of did the same thing where you would just make a piece of geometry and assign a light shader. If you're a Maxwell user, that does the same thing as well. So Octane essentially does that. Is anyone still around? Somebody just say hi. Okay, so so what the developer has done in this case. Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. Somebody just say something every now and then. Okay, so what the developer has done in this case is he's made something called as an Octane light, which is essentially he's just taken a piece of geometry, assigned a light shader, and made like a digital asset out of it. So it just helps you get things started faster. But you have 3 different ways to make lights in Octane. Okay, so I'm going to show you all 3. So you can just create an Octane light, and then I can just move it around over here. And if I hit IPR, so there you go, you have a basic light. Ah, yes. Yeah, there's always an 8-second delay. Okay. Okay, so if you come to the light, you have basic options here, like you have a quad, you have a circle. Give me a second here. Yeah, so you have a quad, you have a circle, you have a sphere, you have a torus, and yeah, there you go. You have a torus, you have a tube light, and then you have a spotlight. Okay, so he's given some basic things in there for you to get started, okay, which is pretty nice. So this is one way to create a light. Okay, so let's just go through some of the light options before we look at a few of the other methods. So you have the basic, you have 2 types of emission. You have black body or you can have texture. So with black body, you can do like your basic temperature based emission, and you can define, the intensity of it. And you have a few other options, like you can have it visible on specular only. You can have it visible on diffuse, turn off cast shadow. So you have some basic options now. You can make it double-sided if you want. And then you have other things like, let me just move this to the side. You have things like you can turn off, camera visibility. If you can also turn off opacity. Okay, so you can go either ways with this. And then you can also change it to texture emission. So if you want to give it like a specific color, then you can give it a specific color. Yeah. Okay, so this is one way of making lights. Now another way of making lights, I'll just delete this for now, is let's say if I just make a torus, and I'll just keep it up here. Let me just come in here and yeah. So what you can do is we can just apply the object parameters in Octane, and the last option here is to basically turn on light emission. So if you turn on light emission and hit IPR, this will automatically function like a light. So it's pretty straightforward. So if you've created some piece of text you want to turn into neon, this is a simple way of doing that. It's pretty straightforward. And it has the same options in here. Like, you don't really have any other changes. But yeah, if you just want to do something really basic, you don't want to go from there, you can make it here. Okay, the third method is to go via, is to build your own shader. Okay, now building your own shader has advantages, especially when you want to, do some really complex stuff. Like, you want to apply a gradient shader or a noise map to your emission. You want to do projection work, with your light. You can do stuff like that. You can also make spotlights. Okay, so what I'm going to show now is how to use the Octane light shader and making a spotlight, because a spotlight isn't directly available within Octane, but you can make your own. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to take a circle, and here's something to remember. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so this will be a polygon, and yeah, let's just move it here, rotate it. I'll just make it slightly smaller. Now here's something that you should remember is the techniques I'm showing here. If you are a Cinema 4D user, on occasion, then the same techniques apply there. Like, the material settings don't change. They may look different, but the parameters and the settings are pretty much the same. So that won't change. Okay, so let's make a light material. Okay, so the way you can do it is we'll just create an Octane network, and let's call it Spotlight. And we'll assign it here. Let's also give this a UV map. So I'm just going to come in here and we'll take a UV project. Okay, just for fun, might not do anything with it, but we'll just give it a UV map. So you can take a universal material and create a light shader as well, but I'll just take a diffuse because it's a smaller node. Like a universal, you don't really need it for now. So just take a diffuse. So take a material diffuse. Like, if you see the size difference, this is just a size thing, the universal material has too many options. But what we need is just the emission input. So there's an emission input here and an emission input there. So we don't really care about the rest of the material. Okay, so just assign this. We'll assign this thing here, and then just take, you'll find a node area called emission, and you only have 2 in there. So we'll just take black body and assign it here. And so if I hit IPR, we should have a light. So there you go. Okay, we have a light. So now how do you convert this into a spotlight? So let me just adjust this a little bit. And okay, so this is weird, but I read about it on a forum and it's actually quite useful. So I said, okay, this is a nice technique. So what you can do is take a fall off. And if I connect this fall off, how to learn WOPs? I don't think there is a specific training for WOPs. It's mostly just practice. There's really nothing else I can give you advice on. Okay, so coming back to this. Okay, so what you want to do is, so this is slightly tricky. Okay, or not tricky, but yeah, so what you want to do is take the minimum value, make it 1, take the maximum value, make it 0, and plug this into efficiency. Okay, hold on, let me just plug that in again, and there you go. Okay, now what you do is take the fall off skew factor and lower it, and bingo, you have a spotlight. Okay, so if I just lower the intensity here, and let me just see this from top, there you go, you have a spotlight. So if you want to make a spotlight in Octane, that's how you do it. Okay, now here's something else that you can do. So if I make it smaller in size, it will become sharper, because this is a little Like right now, this is very blurred out because the size is too big. So you just lower the size and then come in here to the shader and increase the intensity. So just take this up. Now, another thing you can do with this is after this one, like after this node, plug in a gradient. And this is what you do. You just take this, like take a white in here and then take a pure black. And there you go. See, so if you want like a proper fall off, see, there you go. There's your spotlight. So yeah, so if you ever want to create a spotlight in Octane, this is how you go about doing it. And one of the interesting advantages of this is that you can actually color it. Okay, so in the sense that if you remember my RenderMan presentation, so there was this light option in RenderMan where you could give a separate color to where it fades out. And that's something that you can do with this, because what you can do is if we come into the shader and let me just take a texture emission. I don't really know what to do with Vectron. Okay, because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this looks cool, but then what do I do with it on a day-to-day basis? And I don't know what to do with it on a day-to-day basis. So what you do is if you take this gradient and then if you color this, so let's say the interior is going to be blue, and then the edge is going to be like, let's say pink or something. See, there you go. And then we can take another black and just push it in. So you can do something like this, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, so if you want to do like a custom spotlight, this is how you do it. And you can, depending on what you use, the shape will change. So if I change it from, yeah, I have no idea how to use Vectron. Okay, so if I just take a grid, and this is quite huge, let's make it like 2 by 2, and yeah, very few segments. And let's hit reload. And let's try to rotate it around. Okay, give it a second. Yeah, there you go. So since this is a rectangle or this is a square, if you increase the size of it, the shape will automatically, like this will become slightly more squarish. You can actually just put a texture, like if you want like a proper texture, just multiply it with the current shader. But you need a map like that. I don't have a map like that right now. But if you want to put like an HDR, just like within this, just do a multiply. Okay, like after this gradient, you can multiply it with like an HDR image. I'll try to pick up something for my next video just to show you how to do that. But I did it once in my my desert training, like the one where I make like that lava cake and stuff. In the end of that, there is a place on how you can use HDR for lighting. So you can just, it's a simple texture. If you find like an umbrella light or something, just do a UV mapping and connect it into efficiency. It's basically that, like it's nothing fancy. But anyway, so this is how you can do a spotlight. Now, again, the idea here is make full usage of the shelves. Okay, so what you can do is if you want to make these kind of custom shaders, I still don't know how to save shaders to the material palette, but that's fine. What you do is you just take these and again drag and drop them to a shelf. So the next time you want to make a spotlight, you want to make a black body texture or a texture light, just, click here and it will make a spotlight for you. See, so if I zoom out, see, this is my black body spotlight. Okay. So it's fairly, like once you make it once, drag and drop it to the shelf and just next time use it. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. So So this is essentially the basics of it. Let's hide the light. I don't want this right now, so I'll get rid of it. Okay, and I'm going to let's take an HDR. So I'll just come in here to render, and I should have an HDR here somewhere. Yeah, okay, so I have this is one of the standard HDRs that I use, and I will plug it into my environment texture, and let's hit IPR. So now we have a standard HDR for lighting. Yeah, so let me just zoom in here. Okay, so Octane doesn't have a dome light, so you need to do this. You can also add multiple HDRs. So that's something that you can do. You can't, again, with other render engines, you take multiple dome lights. Here you just take multiple images. Okay, so what I can do is, if let's say I want 2 of these, I can just do Control C, Control V, and then I can just take an add. So just take an add here, and we can add a second one, and just spin it around. So if I spin this, see, so I have one coming from this side. So it's pretty straightforward. Ooh, nice. Where do you work? Okay, so here's something else that you can do, which is you can actually color your HDRs. Okay, so you can actually take a standard RGB color and just plug it into the power. So just take another one here, and I can plug this into power. And so let's say this is blue. So you should be able to see it then. Oh, nice. And then let's say this is going to be red, or maybe yellow would be better. Yeah, there you go. See. Yeah, I'm terrible with colors. Okay, this is fine. Okay, the other thing that is also interesting is adjusting gamma is like you're increasing contrast. Okay, so if you really adjust the gamma higher, the image becomes that much more, the HDR becomes that much more high contrast. So it actually starts giving out more light. And then I can just translate this around. Let's make this something richer in color. Yeah, and let's adjust the HDR for this as well. Okay, so there you go. So you can light up using multiple HDRs that way if you want. Okay. Okay. So this is how to use HDRs. Okay. Now let's start to set up a basic shader. So if we come into the Rhino, this is a really weird HDR. Hold on a second. I'm going to change this back to something normal. Okay. See, this is why I like this, because what you can do is I can disconnect this and keep it to a side, and I can just do a copy paste, take in that much and bring this back. So if I want that thing back, I can just, connect it back over here. So having it at a node level is kind of useful in places. Okay, so I'm back to my standard sunlight HDR. And let's just bring this a little bit here. Okay, and maybe a little higher. Okay, and let's add one more light in here. So I'm going to take it from here. So we'll take an Octane light and drop it in there. Yeah, and hit reload. And there we go. Okay, cool. So this is fine. And let's make it more blue. Okay. Okay, so if you come into the universal material, you have a ton of options. So you have multiple transmission models. So you have GGX, Beckman, and Lambertian. and Octane is the standard one. You can go from like standard to metallic. Okay, so this is standard PBR stuff. Like you want to do like the standard metallic roughness workflow. This is basically what that is. You can do roughness. Okay, if you want to do anisotropy, you have to be on GGX or Beckman. Octane does not seem to work. Okay, like the Octane mode does not seem to work. So keep it on GGX, and then I can just take the anisotropy really high. Okay, give me a second. I'm going to come in here and scale this down. Yeah, and let's just bump up the light a little bit. Okay, and let's see if this works. So let me increase this. Yeah, oh yeah, sorry. There you go. So you have to be on GGX for it to work. Yeah, sorry, that's the transmission model. This is the reflection model. But there you go. Yeah. So now if you spin it around, see, now you have anisotropy. So the problem is like if you keep it to Octane and you try to do anisotropy, it's not going to work. Okay, so you have to do, if you want to do anisotropy, it has to be on GGX level. So there you go. So now you can like spin it around and get your reflection that way. Okay, so this is like your standard reflection with zero anisotropy. So if I just blur it up, and then this is with anisotropy. Okay, so you can do that. Then you have, if you're not in metallic mode, if you just have your standard, so you have your basic, dielectric IOR, which is your standard stuff, and you can define whatever color you want. Then you have other options, like you can have standard reflection mode, you have IOR plus color, you have RGB IOR. So there's a website called refractiveindex.org. So you can sort of go there and get refractive indexes for if you want like physically accurate metals. Okay, so let's just go back to metal temporarily. I'll do a blur here. So let's say if you want to do something like car paint. Okay, let me do one thing. I'm going to come in here and just increase the intensity of the light. Yeah, okay, there we go. So if you want to do like a simple car paint, like a basic metal shader, with a secondary coat on top, then this is where the universal shader is quite nice. Okay, so you can just, like we make it metallic, I'll lower it to about here. And then you can just come down to coating and we can just give it a secondary, coat reflection. So that's your basic, or let's say if you want to make it slightly bluish or something. See, so you can get something like that. Yeah, so you have like 2 layers of reflection then if you want. So this is just the basic one and then you have a secondary one on top of it. Okay, then you have other options, like you can give it film width if you want. Okay, so this is like you want to do iridescence, you can do that. So which is kind of funky if you want to do that. And then let's get rid of metallic. Oh, that looks fancy. Yeah. Let's get rid of the coating as well. And you can do something called sheen. So sheen is good for doing, hold on. Yeah, so sheen is good for doing cloth and stuff. Okay. So if you come in here and you just, let's say I give it like a slight, I haven't started rendering that as yet. Okay. So yeah, so you can see like a slight fall off color coming to the edges of it. And then you can just increase the roughness, and then that becomes, like if you want to do like any kind of cloth or velvet or stuff like that, you can do this. Even though actually this is not good for velvet, because what I realized with velvet was that with velvet, the brighter color is in the center and the darker color is towards the edge. Okay, so if you want to do velvet, sheen doesn't work for that. So like if I want to do velvet, just take a fall off. Okay, so take a fall off. This is a slight detour, but you can take a fall off and a gradient, and then I can just plug this in and plug it into albedo. So you'll get this, and then just set like a brighter color in the center and a darker color towards the edge. See, so velvet is essentially like that. Like if you ever check out an image of like a velvet, coat or shader or anything like that, velvet is essentially like this. Okay, so, and then of course velvet is shiny as well. So we can just take this and slightly lower the fall off. Yeah, so something like this, and then just give it some shine. So take the specular and make it high and lower the IOR. Yeah, this is the stupidest thing to do with velvet, but yeah, just sort of like lower it a lot. But yeah, if you ever want to set up velvet, then this is how you want to go about doing this. This is a terrible example, but yeah, always remember this much. Like if you're doing like cotton and stuff, then you have darker colors towards the center and brighter towards the edge. And then if you're doing velvet, it's the opposite. So there's brighter towards the center, and then, did I just say the same thing? Yeah, so brighter on the edge, darker at the center is for other pieces of cloth. And for velvet, it is bright towards the center and dark on the edge. Anyways, I'm going to stop talking now, which would be a very bad stream. Okay, let's sort of cut that, and let's do subsurface scatter. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here and let's spin this around so it's from the other side, like way over there. Okay, and then I'm going to take that light. Let's make it bigger again. Yeah, and we will move it behind the rhino. So I'm going to take this and move it there. Just so we can see the subsurface scatter. Oh, you're welcome. Okay, this is getting a little stupid. Hold on a second. Yeah, I think this is okay. So I'm just going to make it slightly brighter. Yeah. Okay, so how to do subsurface scatter? Okay, and let's just jump in here to ShopNet. And the usual way I like to do it is through a specular shader. So what you want to do first of all is you need to turn this into glass. So we'll first do glass and then we'll do this. So take the albedo to black. You have a connection here called transmission. So just take an RGB color and just connect it into transmission and make it white. And this will give you glass. Make sure roughness is 0. Now there are two things you need to do. Firstly, come to the material and turn on fake shadows. That is important. Otherwise it takes too long to sort of clean up. The second issue is that my ray bounces are too low. So if you come to the part tracer, you'll see that the specular depth is only 3, which is not good, especially for Octane. So keep it to about like 9 or 10, and then it'll like really light up. Okay. So coming in here, you have some basic stuff, right? So you can do, you can give this a basic color if you want to, like that's fine. Okay. What you can also do is you can do basic absorption. So if I just come to medium, you'll find absorption. Okay, so just take absorption and then we can connect it to medium, like over there. So just plug this into medium and then give it a color. See, you can see like a little bit happening at thin areas, and just lower the density. And there you go. And then we can also try to give it a little bit of roughness. So let's get it here, or maybe slightly higher. Yeah. Hello. Okay, so this is, basic glass kind of stuff. Or you can also do like chocolate with it. You can do multiple types of liquids with it. Okay, so you can do like a whole bunch of stuff. Like you want to do like coffee or something, you can come in to like a color like this. See, there you go. Okay, well, that's not really coffee. And then just increase the density of it depending on what you want to do. So now this is why fake shadows is important, because if you turn it off, then it becomes like it tries to calculate caustics and it takes longer. Okay, so don't do that. The other new option is you also have an option called thin wall, which just makes it like if you're doing architectural work and you want you have a single sheet for your glass and you want that to just get reflections, you can do thin wall. Like this is an option that's been asked for like ages, but they finally added it. Okay. Which do I prefer for rendering? I mostly use Octane. It's not really a preference thing. I also use DAZ a lot, and DAZ has Octane. So it's just easier. Like whenever I'm doing something in between, like DAZ and in Houdini, so it's easier for me to move with the same render engine. So that's primarily one of the reasons. And yeah, I'm comfortable with it now. Okay, so I don't feel like changing over to anything else. But as I said, like my usage is very specific. Okay, like if you're doing like a lot of VFX work, and you will face issues with Octane. So which is why a lot of people use V-Ray or Redshift or Arnold, whatever. But if you're doing like concept artwork or this kind of stuff that I do, which is a lot of illustrations, Octane is perfectly fine. So depending on what you're doing, it either works for you or it doesn't work for you. Okay, so subsurface scatter. So subsurface scatter is just one extra step beyond this. So take a medium scattering, okay, and then we can just plug this into medium, and then take the scattering and bring it up, and there you go. You have subsurface scatter. So it's as simple as that. Okay. And then all you want to do is just take the density and lower it and see, there's subsurface scatter. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Now, the one thing to remember with subsurface scatter and Octane, okay, Octane is highly sensitive to light bounces. Okay, like really, really sensitive. So let me just do one thing. Let me just give this some kind of color. Yeah. That looks fancy. Usually if you take a color in scatter, then the thinner areas get the color, or actually the thicker areas get that color, and the thinner ones tend to go to the opposite color. So if you just want to give a color to your object, use the absorption, and that will be better. Okay. Like if you want the whole thing to be like pink or purple or whatever, give an absorption color. But I'll just give it a scattering color anyways, because it looks a little more fancy. Yeah. So there you go. That's a fancy looking thing. So here's the issue that I was talking about. Okay. So yeah, I won't go on a rant on a live stream. That would be a stupid thing to do. Okay, so the problem that happens is once you are in subsurface scattering mode, you'll notice that the specular depth doesn't have as much of an impact on it. Okay, but the diffuse depth tends to have. Okay, so if you go down to 1, and you'll see that it doesn't really light up as much. And then as you increase this, you'll see the subsurface scattering actually start lighting up a fair bit more. So if I get it up to something like 11, see, there you go. So usually when I'm doing skin, I keep it, most of my renders are around 8. Okay, like that's where I usually keep my subsurface scattering value. Um, yeah, I think maybe next time, because it's almost been an hour. So I was going to try and do more stuff, but I don't want to be streaming for 2 hours. It would be a little too much. But yeah, that's what you want to do. Like if you're doing subsurface scattering, make sure your diffuse bounces are high enough. Otherwise, it'll still work. It just won't look as good. Like if I keep diffuse bounces, like let me do a snapshot. You'll see the difference. Okay, so if I take this down to so if I take this down to say 6 or 5, and you can immediately see the difference between the two. Okay, like these areas start to get darker. Like down here, there isn't as much color as there was before. Yeah, I'm just going to, it's a very grainy thing, but let's say if I bring this down to 2, and that's a huge difference then. So this is at 11 and this is at 4. Okay, or what was it? 6, I think so. Yeah, so this is at 11, this is at 6, and that's at 2. It doesn't look bad, but it just, like if you wanted to really light up, then you need to increase your diffuse bounces. Octane is that way. I don't know whether to call it physically accurate or not, but it is it reacts to light tremendously. Okay, so light bounces are fairly important. In a lot of render engines, beyond 4, you can't make out too many differences. With Octane, you can actually make out a fair bit of difference. So yeah, work with higher bounces. It's not a bad idea. Yeah, let me just keep this to something. Okay, so this is... Should I stop here? I think I should stop here. It's already been an hour. Okay, so just before we do one more, I'll just go into one more thing. Okay, where is it? Okay, now the subsurface scatter also depends on the IOR value. Okay, so if I make a snapshot of this, and if I get the IOR down to 0 or down to 1, you'll see that the result is completely different. Like the one thing that happens is that the reflection goes away. Okay, so that's an issue. But let's say if I keep the reflection to 0 anyways, okay, and this is at 1, let it render through, and then we'll see it at different IOR values. So if I do a snapshot of this and then I get the IOR up to 1.1, and you can immediately, you can pretty much see the difference, the way the light changes. See, this starts to shift a little bit. Okay, let me do a snapshot. Let's see the difference. See, you can start seeing the value starting to shift. And then if I take it up to say 1.4, yeah, so depending on the IOR values, you can get different results. I think that's happening because of the scattering color. I gave a weird scattering color, so it's getting a little funky right now. Okay, but yeah, so there you go. So you can see the whole thing shift. But what you can do here is if you want the base to not have any issues. Yeah, there you go. See, that was because of the scattering color. So if you don't want any base reflections, this is we don't want this. So then what you can do is you can just take, the coat reflection. So we can just take this and get it to 1. See, so you can get a secondary reflection that way. Okay. So if you want to do basic subsurface scatter with a little bit of reflection on top of it, the universal shader is quite nice for that. I have my graphics card. I have a 1080 and a 1080 Ti. So I haven't gotten around to buying a 2080 Ti. I want to, but I'm waiting for everybody to do the RTX implementation. So hopefully by the end of the year. Okay, so by the time I think October, November comes around, most of at least Redshift and Octane will have Octane has RTX support right now in beta, but it still needs to be issues need to be solved, and I think Redshift is also working on their RTX support. So I think by the end of the year, things will be in place. Then I'll pick up. Right now, not so much. But the one thing to remember about RTX, okay, is RTX primarily is for speeding up heavy geometry scenes. So if you're doing a scene like this, which is not very heavy, is mostly like complex shaders, you might not see a very big difference in your render time. But if you're doing like really complex, if you're doing really heavy geometry scenes with lots of instancing and stuff like that, like you're doing like a bombed out city or something, then RTX really comes into play. But for standard scenes like these, it might not, so it's not like a magic trick. It doesn't speed up everything. It only speeds up, primarily it speeds up geometry calculation. So if your scenes are very, very simple, you're not going to see too much of a difference. Okay. Because shader calculation does not speed up too much with RTX, at least for now. So you have to keep that in mind before you invest into an RTX card. Even though the 2080 Ti is a fantastic card. Like I know someone who has a 2080 Ti and it's about twice the speed of a 1080 Ti. Okay, like straight up. No RTX, nothing. It's just 2 times. And then if you throw in RTX, it becomes about 4 times. Okay, so my Octane bench was about 290 and his Octane bench without RTX was about 500 plus. And then with RTX, it was straight up at around 1500. Okay. But that was again like a fairly heavy geometry scene. So yeah, so even without RTX, the 2080 Ti is a phenomenally powerful card. It's like, as I said, it's like double the 1080 Ti. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop here. Okay, what I'll do is, I wanted to do more, but I think basics were important. Okay. Yeah, here's the thing with 4 1070s. The problem is the RAM. Okay, like having 4 cards still only gives you the RAM of 1 card because memory does not, like 4 cards doesn't mean you're multiplying your memory. Your memory still remains the same. So a 2080 Ti has 11 GB RAM and a 1070 has 8. So at the end of the day, if you have a heavier scene, with a 1070 you start going to a 10 GB scene, it's going to start going out of core, which you don't want to do with any GPU renderer because things do slow down. Okay. So traditionally, if you're dealing with fairly like relatively heavy geometry scenes or scenes that require RAM, it is better to have a card which has more RAM. Okay, so 2 2080 Ti's would any day be preferable in comparison to 4 1070s or even 6 1070s if you can fit that into a PC. So yeah, which is the reason I went for a 1080 Ti because it has 11 GB RAM. And I know someone who actually has like 2 Titan RTXs, which has like 22 GB. Yeah, I am not that rich, but that would be nice to have. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to stop here and I'll do another live stream. I'll try to do more stuff. I think the basics took up enough time, but the point was to just sort of give you an idea of how to speed things up. Okay, like the light setup and the basic render setup is, I think, what takes the longest with Octane. Like a lot of people, if you're using Octane for the first time, it becomes like, yeah, I have to do this every single time. Okay, like whatever you're doing, it always like, oh, okay, go in here, make a shopnet node and make a ropnet. So remember that, like, just come in here to your, like, make a shelf, create the Octane setup, make a couple of light shaders that you want. And yeah, like you get up and running faster. And honestly, you can do that with anything. So you want to do that with any other render engine that you have. If you're in, how do I remember all these settings? Just practice. I've been doing this for 20 years now. So yeah, just mostly practice. And I have a gift of jumping through render engines. Okay, so what I'll do next time is we'll continue with this scene, or actually not this scene, but I'll do a few more. So I'll do like a couple more shaders. I'll do volumes as well. So I'll do volumes and particles and hair next time. And then maybe after that one I'll do like new features, because I wanted to do a stream of new features, but then I figured like I should do a stream of basics first. So because there might be people who, the ones who are still using Octane, who might be sort of like, oh, might have some issues with basics. So this is for basics. And yeah, I'll do smoke next time. So I'll do smoke, and I'll do like particles, and I'll do hair. And then after that one, I'll do one for, all the new features of Octane. So yeah, that's basically it. So I barely covered anything that I was going to do. I wanted to do a fair bit more. Let me just, before I close this, I'll open up my scene. Let me save this. I'll open up my final scene just to show you what the render looks like. Yeah, this error that you're getting, it's primarily because there used to be a new, like earlier within the Octane shader, there was a rounded edge option. That has been removed, and now you have a rounded edge texture. So the reason why you're getting these errors is because the old stuff hasn't been removed as yet. Like the developer needs to remove it from the ready-made nodes. That's why you're getting these errors. But they don't really matter. Okay, so give it a second. It's just calculating a little bit. So before everybody leaves, I don't know if, hang around for 2 more seconds. I'll just render this. These are the places, some of the times why I like Octane a lot is because these kind of really complicated light scenes where you have, these many amount of lights and stuff around, it actually works really well. Okay. So they have added new lights in the latest version, which is like an experimental build. Those are even faster. Okay, so Octane as it is pretty decent with cleaning up lights, but with the new lights, it's actually like 3 to 4 times faster. Okay, so let me just hit IPR. Yeah, so there you go. This is, let me modify this. This is the reason why I like this window. Okay, because you can just do, you can rescale it and move it around. It's easier to work that way. Oh, okay. I'm using only one GPU right now because I didn't want to use both. Because I didn't want to slow down my machine. Like I didn't want to have any errors happening while streaming. But yeah, there you go. Okay, so this is the whole thing. This is actually what I wanted to create. But apparently, I misjudged the time for things. Yeah, so this has everything. Like this has volumes, and the particles have motion blur, and this has subsurface scatter. This actually has 3 layers of reflection on it. So there are new layered materials that are now available in Octane. So this is using that. So I had a basic subsurface scatter, and then just for, no reason whatsoever, I threw in like 3 layers of reflection on top of it just to see how it works. So yeah, and then you have like a whole bunch of other stuff in here. Like if I just zoom around a little bit. So this is giving out light. I have one light at the back here. I have another light over here. And then, all of these are giving out light. So this is fairly heavy geometry wise. So this is a fair bit. And then of course you have grass down there and, a whole bunch of stuff. So hopefully next lesson I might do a breakdown of this one. But as I said, like first we'll do smoke and particles and stuff. And then I'll do this. So I don't know, maybe I'll do a redshift presentation as well. Even though I'm not I can't say I'm the best at redshift. I use it enough, but I'm not very technically well versed with it. I don't go into every single setting and figure it out, but I'll do a redshift presentation as well. Why not? Well, Karma hasn't been released as yet. I'm not a beta tester, so someday, I was a beta tester once. I'm a terrible beta tester. I don't give any feedback whatsoever. So yeah, so
I think it's a November release. It's pretty far away. Like from whatever I heard, it's supposed to be November, so it's a long way away. So when it comes out, I'll do something with Karma. Till then, So I'll do, who knows, maybe next week I get bored, I'll do a Redshift presentation. Or we'll do Octane again. Either ways, I'll do something. Okay, so yeah, that's basically it. And I hope this was useful. I don't know how many of you are still using Octane. But yeah, if you're still using it, there you go. This is Octane. Okay. So bye. Good night. Well, it's night here. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll do Redshift next time. Like, why not? We'll do Redshift. Okay. Okay. Bye.